Of course, somebody.
No, you're not.
Yeah. We are live.
She's showing me her horse's skull.
Oh.
The youngest came up with she's an artist, so having the bone structure of animals that have died out in the pasture is important to her. Art. Okay, anyway. Hello and welcome to Ezekiel Bible Study Part 4. We are not on the ball this morning real well. I've already been through 2 cups of coffee and it's not kicking in for some reason right now. A lot going on, trying to get the magazine ready to go out next week. And so I think my brain is all sucked out on that one. Anyway.
In case you're interested in our magazine, you can get it signed. You can get signed up and get 2 for the price of 1.
Yes.
Very soon.
For the next week, whenever the next one comes up. Yep, that's exactly right.
Go to prairiedusttrail.com and get signed up for that. There's a lot of good articles coming up in this one. There were a lot in the last one too.
Yes.
Yeah.
There is a link in the description. I'll go ahead and put in the comment too. If you go to this, you can find the community and the magazine from there. So, yeah. Okay. Ezekiel chapter 6 is what we are on right now. I will share screen. And hello. And who wants to read this time?
I can. We are doing NASB, is that correct?
I think that's what this one, I had to pull up Bible Hub because Bible Gateway is not working right now. So that's usually what Bible Hub has.
Well, I actually pulled it up on mine today, so I was just making sure I had the right version. New American Standard Bible, 1995.
Yeah.
Oh, then.
I have no idea if Bible Hubs is 95, but yeah.
Alrighty. So, Ezekiel chapter 6, idolatrous worship denounced. And the word of the Lord came to me, saying, Son of man, set your face toward the mountains of Israel and prophesy against them and say, Mountains of Israel, listen to the word of the Lord God. Thus says the Lord God to the mountains, the hills, the ravines, and the valleys, Behold, I myself am going to bring a sword on you, and I will destroy your high places. So your altars will become desolate, and your incense altars will be smashed. And I will make your slain fall in front of your idols. I will also lay the dead bodies of the sons of Israel in front of their idols, and I will scatter your bones around your altars. In all of your dwellings, cities will become waste, and the high places will be desolate, that your altars may become waste and desolate. Your idols may be broken and brought to an end. Your incense altars may be cut down, and your works may be blotted out. The slain will fall among you, and you will know that I am the Lord. However, I will leave a remnant, for you will have those who escape the sword among the nations when you are scattered among the countries. Then those of you who escape will remember me among the nations to which they will be carried captive, how I have been hurt by their adulterous hearts, which turned away from me, and by their eyes, which played the harlot after their idols. And they will loathe themselves in their own sight for the evils which they have committed, for all their abominations. Then they will know that I am the Lord. I have not said in vain that I would inflict this disaster on them. I told you so. Thus says the Lord God, clap your hands, stamp your foot, and say, Alas, because of all the evil abominations of the house of Israel, which will fall by sword, famine, and plague. He who is far off will die by the plague, and he who is near will fall by the sword, and he who remains is besieged will die by the famine. Thus will I spend my wrath on them. Then you will know that I am the Lord. When their slain are among their idols, around their altars, on every high hill, on all the tops of the mountains, under every green tree and under every leafy oak, the places where they offered soothing aroma to their idols. So throughout all their habitations I will stretch out my hand against them and make the land more desolate and waste than the wilderness toward Diblah. Thus they will know that I am the Lord. The end.
The end.
That was the whole chapter of I told you so.
This definitely reminds me of when Chief Joseph and Laurelyn Riverwind went to Israel, and they sang a American indigenous song to some of the rabbis there. And in the song, some of the rabbis asked, I mean, how did you know the name of the Lord in that song? And I can't remember which, variation they use, but it's, and he just told them, these songs have been passed down through generations to us. And then there you have in Ezekiel saying, where is it? Let's see. That they will remember.
In 9,
Is it
and
9?
those who escape will remember me among the nations.
Yeah, and then in the nations to which they have been carried captive, you survivors will remember me. And how I have been grieved by their adulterous hearts, and that turned away from me, and that their eyes lusted after idols. So they will loathe themselves for the evil they have done, for their abominations. But, I mean, it's just, and your survivors will remember me. That's what it reminded me of. And I think we probably have a lot of signs of that in all of the nations. I mean, I know that there's a church, and Nehemiah Gordon had found a church in Norway, I think it was, that had above the door of the church the YHWH, the letters in Hebrew, the Hebrew letters of Yahweh up there above the church. And I think it actually had the vowel markings with it for it to be like Yahovah. Vowel markings, if I remember right. Yeah, I thought it was. So people took that with them.
Yeah.
And it was there in a lot of places. And I've been kind of, whenever I have a chance, studying the Nordic Viking runes and their, alphabet, their writing, and comparing it to Greek and Hebrew. And I just more and more believe that that's where it came from. A lot of it. It's so similar in so many ways.
That's fascinating. That is really fascinating.
I think so. I think
the linguistic stuff is always just like, what? Like, in all the connections.
Yeah. I would love to be able to sit down with, like J.R.R. Tolkien, because he was a linguist specific, and be able to sit down with him and because he had gone into the Finnish and the Welsh and some of those really, really out there written languages that it's like, oh, wow. And especially knowing that he was, his background and stuff, what he
Yeah.
what he thought about it all. Just pick his brain.
Yeah, that would be really interesting to do. But I think it's also a good point with just some of the things that we're hearing today too, to remember that they were scattered. They were scattered everywhere. Like after the Babylonian exile, they never all came back to the land. It never all of them. They were always scattered. And we see this here because it says the remnant is not in the land. The remnant is around the world. So
Scattered.
yeah.
I know the Cherokee, they had a law name for the Great Spirit. It was like Unetlanahi, I think. But then whenever the priests would do anything, or the shaman or medicine men, whatever you wanted to call them in English, whenever they had special rituals and stuff where they were doing things specifically regarding the Great Spirit, they would use the Great Spirit's real name, which is Yoa.
Oh, okay. There you go.
So, yeah, you see examples of all around the world, whether those people, there's a big controversial topic about whether Native Americans have Jewish blood or not, and it's been largely established by science that they don't trace back. But you can't argue whenever you look all around the world that the name of God is all around the world.
Yeah.
Everywhere you go. And it's not hard to find. So, whether it's because of the remnant of the Hebrews that spread it, or some other way that God got it out there, his name is known all around the world. And
right.
been forgotten off and on. And, like we see with the in Asia, and especially a lot of the original Chinese before Taoism and stuff like that, and Taoism, they were a monotheistic entire culture was monotheistic. And you see that in a lot of the ancient dynasties. And they and so much in their language too. They're not hieroglyphs. They're Chinese characters. Their language characters and stuff. You see the story of the Bible written out in so many of those, and their original ancient religion was monotheistic, with like whenever you go through the story of their belief and everything, it was like almost line for line exactly what you see in the beginning of Genesis. And kind of up to like after or right before Abraham is where it starts. Basically, Tower of Babel is where you start seeing the differences all around the world. And so any place that you can find record of their religious beliefs, a lot of them you will find at one time were monotheistic and believed in one great spirit. And generally, the name is pretty much the same across the board.
Yeah. And I wondered about the India. I've talked a little bit with Ganesh Data from the Sapient podcast. And he's Hindu, but I don't think he's really like practicing Hindu. He doesn't know a lot of it. He admitted he doesn't know a lot of his own history. And I'm like, he had heard about, he's been following some of my stuff, and he had heard about the Hebrew version of the New Testament that was found in India, and I told him, I said, well, I really feel like, at least some of the wise men were probably from India that came over and brought the gifts to Yeshua whenever he was born. And he's like, yeah, and if you look at their, yeah, and I've wondered which of theirs is actually depicting God. And, so many of them, we know that they are either watchers because they have so many, but they're either watchers or they're Nephilim. And looking at their stories, in stone, I mean, and so much of that was dug up later.
And that's something that you can see these stories by cultures that really preserved it in stone. And that's where we see a lot with the Egyptians, the Babylonians, in India, in China. They did so well to preserve all of this stuff.
And unfortunately, that's where, in the early or in the 1800s, whenever, the youngsters are wanting to talk about the colonialism and stuff, I think that was a big part of it, was they were trying to go and erase that because it didn't fit what they were trying to teach people at the time. It didn't fit evolution. It didn't fit, the accepted biblical narrative that they were trying to get people to understand. And you've seen, and we still today, I think some of the wars that we've got going on are to deface those histories. And then you've got the WHO and whatnot going in and taking over archaeological areas and either permanently, trying to ruin it for future generations and saying that they're trying to save it for future generations and not allowing any excavation or anything to happen. Yeah, I don't remember what language. I don't remember what language they were singing whenever they did the songs. I don't think it was Cherokee. I think it was one of the other.
No, I think it was Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
I want to say...
She's Pacific. She's Cherokee.
Yeah. I can't remember. It might have been Cherokee, but I want to say it was Pacific Northwestern, one of the tribes there. So, and I can't remember what tribe he's from.
Yeah, he's like, I think he's a mix of two.
Yeah. And from what I remember, though, it was a song that, like, many tribes knew.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Their own spin on it. So
that's fascinating.
Just like a lot of them have very similar feasts, and feasts that coincidentally line up with coincidentally line up with Hebraic feasts.
Yes.
And like there's so many of the Iroquois that have feasts that line up eerily similar with Hebraic feasts. So,
that is so fascinating.
I know. It's,
oh my goodness.
And it's one of those things, it's like, okay, science says that they don't have Hebraic lines or roots or anything like that. They don't trace back to any of the Jews, but somehow or another, they have those feasts. They have the standards of worship and stuff like that.
And as far as the genetics is concerned, it depends on which papers you read.
I was going to say the genetics is
it's like all of science
about genetics.
For every paper you find that says yay, you're going to find another paper that says nay. Yep. So,
and it's one of those things that it's like, for me personally, I don't care if they aren't part of the tribes. wow, what an awesome God.
Yeah.
Out here.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And if they are, then wow, what an awesome God. He is really nice to you guys.
Yeah. Well, I think I personally find it fascinating because we found out later in life that I actually have a 5 great grandmother who is Cherokee, so I actually am this much Cherokee, as you can tell from my pale skin and white hair. But things that have always been of interest to me are like the Cherokee stuff, the Hebraic roots, and then Irish too. And then so some things that I've learned recently about there being potentially a tribe in Ireland as well. I'm just like, huh, that's interesting. It just makes me wonder, because I've always wanted to know my heritage, but no one in my family seems to know. It's just something that's come up before. And so then, when you're reading scripture and it's just like, okay, whether I am or I am not doesn't really matter, because thank the Lord that Jesus came and we're all, all that believe in him are covered. But it's still just would be really, really cool to actually have those bloodlines as well. It would just be cool,
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of Ezekiel 6, as I was reading it, it was reminding me, the other night I was nerding out to Stephen, and he asked something very simple about Oklahoma, where the Osage, I think it was something like where the Osage Reservation was in Oklahoma and Osage land. Anyway, and then that caused Catherine to nerd out about the different tribes and nations in Oklahoma and go into a whole history dissertation about the ones that fared really well and the ones that didn't. And in my whole diatribe, I started explaining that he started putting 2 and 2 together, and he went, okay, whoa, stop. I'm trying to listen. And he's like, but what I'm catching here, something that's really standing out to me, is that the tribes that have survived, and done very well for themselves, so the Osage, the Cherokee Nation, among a few others, he's like, you've pointed out that all of those started out and still are, for the most part, monotheistic tribes. There's a little bit of ancestor worship here and there, maybe, and of course belief in spirits, but Christians believe in spirits too. So, and he's like, but what you're telling me is that they all had a monotheistic mindset. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, and then the other tribes who didn't do so well, who nearly got wiped out and notoriously had some of the worst massacres. So Black Kettle and the my mind just went blank, Mom. What was his tribe?
The Cheyenne.
Cheyenne. Yeah, Cheyenne. I think. Now I'm not sure of myself.
The Southern Cheyenne and Arapaho was the Black Kettle, and then the big massacres up north were the Northern Cheyenne.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And those were not monotheistic tribes. They were consistently sun-worshipping tribes who also consistently, not all of them, but a lot of them consistently practiced child sacrifice.
Like the Incans, the Aztecs, and the Mayans too.
Yes, and the Pueblo tribes did as well.
Wow.
Not all of them, but some of them. And then the tribes who absolutely fell into human sacrifice and child sacrifice. So the Anasazi, where are they?
Right.
I don't think I've even heard of that tribe.
They don't exist.
Yeah, they don't. They got completely wiped out.
To them, but ancient native stories say they got into child sacrifice, and somehow or another, whether by disease or by a spirit, depending on which tribe you talk to, got wiped off the face of the planet. And all we have are their cliff dwellings.
Yeah.
So, yes.
And we know that they communicated between each other because the Canadian tribes knew the practices of the tribes of the Caribbean and like the Louisiana area and stuff.
Well, we have record. The Iroquois were consistently like mediators between all of the different tribes, and if there was a big war that broke out, and they have this recorded, they have this actually recorded, and they were consistently the 5 Iroquois nations were consistently mediators for so many different tribes and stuff.
Was that the tribe you sent me the video about, Donita, that where Maslow was studying the hierarchy of needs, and they were the ones that whoever gave the most, that was because like they were the ones that were considered the wealthiest or something.
Mm-hmm.
Was that the Iroquois?
That sounds right.
Because that like that one, I was like, that nation sound like that tribe sounds like they were definitely, they belong to Jehovah, like that, because I'm like, that's the way we're told to live in the Bible.
Yeah, the Iroquois were consistently all 5 of the nations. They started out just the Iroquois, but then they got big enough that they split off into 5 branches, and all 5 branches consistently followed the Iroquois code, which is very, very eerily similar to biblical code, and participated in a lot of the same feasts and same times of year and everything.
This is why they don't want us to know the history. This is why they do not want us to nurture history.
Well, in the Bible it talks about corn. Mm-hmm. And corn isn't grown in Israel. Corn's grown in the Americas. So.
And we have found Egyptian artifacts in the Midwest.
Right. There's that.
So, yeah, it's one of those things. As I was reading Ezekiel 6, it was making me think back to like the Cheyenne and stuff. And definitely like the Anasazi and stuff that aren't here anymore. And how it just, whenever you don't turn yourself around, there's going to be huge consequences, to the point that God will make a point to your gods that you serve and lay your bones on their altars and prove a point to everybody else that their God didn't save them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right on.
So, and it just, one of the other tribes, it was the Nez Perce, who were typically monotheistic in practice and stuff. And that is where the original Chief Joseph hailed from, was Nez Perce. And he tried very hard to bring all of the different tribes and nations together to fight against the American government and to reclaim, land and everything. And the tribes that ended up literally like putting a tomahawk in his proverbial back, and messing everything up. They could have done it. They would have easily done it. They had overwhelming numbers. They could have done it, except that the tribes turned on each other. Whenever you go back and look at that history, the tribes that turned on each other were pagan tribes who blew it all to shreds.
Wow.
And he literally, like history says, he has a famous saying, I will fight no more. And then he literally dusted his feet and walked away with his wife. And the Nez Perce are a tribe that are still doing very, very well.
Wow.
And that's part of the reason that the North American tribes, that's part of the reason we're not Spanish. up here is because the North American tribes, the monotheistic North American tribes, saw the Catholicism with the saints, the worshiping of Mary and the saints, as a problem and wouldn't accept that. So, I mean,
which brings up some of the brutality that happened in a lot of the Catholic schools for Native American children, the Indian Catholic schools, and where people have since, even in recent years, found, as they demolished it, hundreds of children's bodies underneath and stuff. And it just, children died holding on to their truly monotheistic beliefs. Wow. A lot of them. Some of them, you know, obviously died for some pagan practices, but for the most part, the children that came from truly monotheistic tribes got persecuted very badly by the Catholic Church.
And the South American tribes, because they're polytheistic, they accepted it much easier. The Catholics were able to work it in with their religions. So you see, you know, the Day of the Dead and things like that, where they've meshed the Catholicism in with their local beliefs, and it meshed well, you know, down there. So that's why you have a lot of, you know, most of South America and Middle America is.
Yeah, and when you go back and read, like, the conquistadors' journals, there were all of them kept journals, and we have most of the journals, and you can actually go back and read them. And whenever they made it into North America, what is now North America, and especially in their hunt for, like, Lost City of Gold and stuff, there were a few different of them. You know, you had some that went to go look for the City of Gold, and then others doing other things. But whenever they got to North America, they were a little surprised whenever they basically got greeted with open arms and was like, "Where you guys been at?" And they're like, "What?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, we used to do trade with you guys across the ocean years ago, and then you guys just up and disappeared." So that was the first shock. And, like, you can go read this in the Conquistador journals. Yeah. Yes. So they were the Native Americans over here, and, like, around Florida is where they were kind of at and stuff. And the Native Americans were like, "Hey, I say, what's up? Where you been at?" And they're like, "What? No, this is new land that we're discovering." They're like, "Huh, no, it's not." And showed them artifacts from Europe that they still had from trade days.
Well, like, and there was even more than that. Some of the drawings and things that they've got, that they did, you know, John Levi has been popping up this one drawing for the last several weeks of, I can't remember which tribe it is, but man and his wife completely clothed. I mean, nice boots. You can tell the pants might be leather, or maybe they had leather chaps or something, and they had like a fur cloak on over them. But she had the Hindu dot on her head, and they look very Indian. So the international thing, the idea that we came over the Bering Strait and, you know, and that, you know, and then nobody had any, and we were lost for thousands of years is ridiculous.
And I mean, what got even more wild in the journal. So first they had that conversation. The conquistador who was writing it was like, "Well, this is news to me. I didn't know we had already been over here." And then they start asking them, they're like, "So how are our brothers over there, like basically in Mexico and South America?" And they're like, "Well, I guess you know about us, so why don't you know about them?" They're like, "Oh, we cut out, like, they had a trade route up here. They built a road. They had a Mayan road up into North America. They talked about it." And then they were like, "But we quit talking to them because they started sacrificing their babies. And we don't deal with them at all anymore. So So are they still around, or did they get like blown up? We're sitting there in like the conquistador who was recording it had basically put in there like they acted like they had expected the Incans and Mayans down there to already have died out because of their way of living. And they were like, they're cursing their land. They just told him flat out, they're cursing their land and we won't have any of it over here. And had basically had a whole border war and was like, you guys don't come over here anymore. We're not doing any trade with you anymore at all. And quit the entire trade route.
I'm sorry, I am having a bit of a problem right now because I love the books and stuff we get for some of our homeschool stuff. I'm not going to rat anybody out, but we did a whole study on like this early stuff. They don't know any of this.
No.
They don't know any of this.
Why?
Why are they not looking at their Colorado?
When I was doing reviews through the schoolhouse reviews, what are those called? I can't remember. Anyway, whenever I was doing reviews, because Shelly and I were both in that program for a while and doing the homeschool reviews, I was really excited about this one curriculum that I was going to get to review. So they send us the curriculum, we go over it. And I think Catherine and I sat there and just like nitpicked. I was so excited about the book, but then we were sitting there, well, that's not right. And that's not right. And it was, it was.
And a large part of it, I don't want to, put people down or their curriculum or anything. Because
exactly.
I'm kind of a special history nerd on this. And I will go read the Epic of Gilgamesh. I've read the Epic of Gilgamesh, and as closely translated as possible. And I went and read the Conquistador journals. And, and so many of the Conquistador journals also get written off by a lot of people as well. They needed to fill the time. And so they put in a lot of fictional stories in there about giants and stuff. And it's like, you really think these guys if they...
Well, we're told the same thing about the revolution, too. Because, everybody wants to say, oh, this is a Christian nation and stuff. And it's like, well, the time period, there's a very Christian worldview that was happening at the time. But if you read the actual letters from John and Abigail Adams to each other, they were Unitarian. And it just like, you can't get by that. Whenever they were talking about providence and thing, at first I thought they were talking about God. But whenever you're getting into it, not so much. It's very transcendental. Very.
And that's one of the things I like to bring up to people who like to try and put down America really bad and be like, oh, well, our nation, it's especially with like some of the recent stuff in Oklahoma, people throwing a fit about the Bible being taught in the schools and whatnot like that. Yeah, exactly. And they're like, well, if you go, and they think they've got a gotcha moment whenever they go, well, you realize the founding fathers weren't actually Christian. I'm like, oh, yeah, I know that. Our founding fathers were from all different races and religions and beliefs, and they all came together and decided that the best way to run a country was on biblical principles, even though several of them were atheists. They all agreed that would work better. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh. I'm like, yeah. So some of you enjoy our country, but here are the values we have it built on because for some stinking reason, those values seem to work.
Well, and then it's hard also to explain that to the church people because they all believe they were Christians because of that. And I'm like, no, we were founded on biblical principles because they work, not because the founding fathers were Christians. Like, go watch the beginning of National Treasure. It tells you everything you need to know.
I know. Isn't that funny?
Basically. It just go
The movies, count on the movies to tell you.
Yeah, and that's the thing, again, kind of where I'm a bit of a special history nerd, is like, I'll go read the letters, I'll go read the journals. I will learn from that what these people were doing, what was going on, and I'll take it for what they were putting it down as, because it was their personal stuff.
And that's one of the keys for homeschooling, is in homeschooling, you don't need a history textbook to tell you what to think about history. You can actually go to the original documents, and that is we're as close to as you can if they have to be translated.
And I mean, most of them are not as hard to read as Shakespeare or Beowulf. Oh my God.
Beowulf.
Yeah, that one is a tough one. Now, Shakespeare, I love Shakespeare.
I do like Shakespeare.
I like Shakespeare, and most documents, though, are not as hard to read as Shakespeare. So even from his era, Shakespeare was awesome with his words and stuff, and he always wrote his plays to like show that skill off. And
he was being purposely cryptic in so many areas, because number one, he was making it poetic for the stage. Mm-hmm. And number two, he was also trying to navigate the politics of that day in a satirical way. I mean, he was the Babylon Bee of the day.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he had to be clever with his wording, and for us today, that does make it a little harder to read and understand.
Yeah, especially since we haven't been taught the proper history of what was actually going on. Yeah.
So, but if you go back and read old documents, and the conquistador journals are very easily translated. They wrote them in Spanish, and Old Spanish, and so that's very easy to translate, or if you know Spanish, you can read them still. So stuff like that. Go back, read the old letters, read the old diaries and stuff. They're not any harder than Shakespeare to read and understand.
You need to make a list for us, Catherine.
Yeah. I didn't know I was going to bring it up, otherwise I would.
That's how Holy Spirit works, right?
For anybody who is interested, Catherine's not going to be able to be with us Thursday, but we are going to be having a Tin Hat Talks Thursday. Finally, again, yay! And we are going to be discussing homeschool stuff, large family parenting, and various things that have been coming up on social media here lately that have caused us to want to have some mom rants. And so Emmy and Shelly and I are going to be having some mom rants on some things. And Emmy and I are working on a curriculum, a homeschool curriculum, in which these original documents are going to be what we are, suggesting, and we'll possibly be putting into, like reading resources for the younger years and stuff too, depending on how we can do this. If you are interested in something like this, definitely get in contact with one of us, because we will be looking for beta testers for that curriculum pretty soon, and to try to help polish things up and get things where they're going to be usable for a variety of family situations. So yeah, definitely tag me in the community if you're interested in that. So I feel like it's like Ezekiel is pretty long, and I'd like to be able to do several chapters at a time, but at the same time, I definitely want to leave plenty of room for us to discuss and see where it takes us, because anytime somebody tells me that the Bible is boring, I'm just like, how can you think that? Because I can sit here and talk about one chapter for an hour.
Yeah. I'm like, obviously you haven't realized that the Bible couldn't be made into a movie, because it would be like XXX rated. So
right. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
It'd have to be a series too. I mean,
well, that too.
Yeah.
You think the Marvel, stuff has gone on and on and on and on. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, just like but even this, like, I mean, just one verse. Look at all the, like, that God is showing us just with one verse about the remnant, because we forget that, especially with everything going on. That's all I'm going to say. It's really easy to just listen to what's happening and believe, oh, well, that must be what it is.
Yeah, or we want to put things into, this isn't touching us here. It has something to do with somebody, on the other side of the world or something. And it's like, no, it does. It applies to us as well, because what is happening in the world today goes all the way back to all of this.
Yeah. And it also kind of puts into perspective that humans are going to do what humans have always done, and that we have a perpetual cycle that we repeat, and there are always consequences for said cycle. There are good consequences for the good cycle that you keep, and there are bad consequences for the bad cycle that you inevitably always fall into.
Yeah.
It is a constant reminder to everyone through history to make sure that you are with the ultimate cycle breaker, Jesus Christ, because that's the only way the entire cycle is going to be broken.
Yeah. And we need to remember too, as things are falling into place and look like they are part of prophecy, and it looks like we're in the middle of prophecy, that the enemy can make things, can try to put things into place, and they're constantly trying to make prophecy happen, and so we need to remember that there's no reason for us to be scared about anything. Persecution can come any day. And if we all think about it, we get persecuted on a regular basis in one way, shape, or form. Whether it's in the workplace or, at the grocery store sometimes, I think. We get it. And it is worse. Some countries have had really, really bad persecution, while we have had it pretty easy over here. And, as a nation, we deserve a lot worse than what we've been getting. So,
that actually makes me think of something that someone was saying the other day. I don't remember what. I've seen way too much lately, but they were reminding us of that verse in one of the Chronicles, that if my people will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will something heal their land. But it's not the evil people, it's my people. It's God speaking. It's Jehovah speaking. My people. So that's where we need to be checking ourselves and asking him to reveal our hearts. Are we in sin right now that we need to repent of? It's like it's so easy to blame it on everybody else, but it's like, okay, but are we living the way we're supposed to?
And we need to remember too that our repentance and our living right before the Lord can also trickle down, where people who really do deserve punishment and will eventually get it, they can be blessed by us. Exactly. Our blessing will spread. So while the world is going to pot, it's being allowed to go to pot because there are people that are repenting, that are living for the Lord, and are doing that. I mean, there's one point where Daniel, bowed and repented for the whole nation.
That's right. He did.
And I think it's kind of, I'm trying to find the specific verse here. Well, verse 9, or 8 and 9. I will leave a remnant for you will have those who escaped the sword. And, then those of you who escape will remember me among the nations. He is always, and he never says any of those were his followers or his people. It's just all this bad stuff is going to happen because all y'all get lined up for weapons right now. Some of y'all ain't.
She never heard that. She never heard that.
I never heard that. No, I was the one getting the whipping. And everybody else got the spoon shaked at him and it was like, you'll be next if you don't.
Oh, I remember lining up all the little bottoms a few times.
So, but it's a good reminder that even though he doesn't say those were his people, he doesn't say anything in this chapter about his people, the ones who follow him or anything. Everybody's going to die, but however, there will be some of you who escape, and you are going to spread my name whenever you do.
Mm-hmm.
And so no matter how bad it gets, God will always make sure that there's going to be some of us who escape to tell the story and glorify his name.
Yeah.
Whether we want to or not.
Yeah. Count those blessings, sing those praises, yeah. Okay.
All right.
Can y'all think of anything else? Or I think that's a good place to end this week.
Yeah.
Right. Awesome. Thank you guys for showing up. And remember, you can make it through the dust storms of life with God's divine help.